you were diagnosed with cardiovascular disease at the age of 30. And that has had a huge impact, not just on your life, but also on what you have developed as your passion and your career. Can you share more with us about what happened right after being diagnosed at 30 with cardiovascular disease?
So, for those watching this on video, you probably look at me and say, like, that doesn't look like your typical cardiovascular disease patient or relative that you know. Cardiovascular disease is a leading preventable cause of death in the world, right? Even back then at the age of 30, I'm 40 now. The person that you saw in front of you, if anything, I was more physically fit. I was the type of person who did CrossFit 6 times a week. I was, I was following whatever the diet of the day was. And so what the hell did I get wrong? Right? Because I was the person who, my mom was a yoga teacher. My dad was in finance, but a side of finance that nobody really wanted to be in. And I remember going to that physical, just thinking everything's going to be okay, because everything's always okay when I was doing physicals every single year from the age of 18. And this was the time when I finally found a doctor. I was living in Singapore and found a doctor who would order any sort of test that I wanted. I was like, okay, at this point, I'd already made up my mind that I was leaving investment banking. I was resigning and serving out this resignation period, which basically means, until they find my replacement. So why not go get every test I can, because it's on my insurance plan, right? Right. After this, if after this I was going to be I still am an entrepreneur, but at that point I was going to start a company. So why not go get those tests? And I remember going into the meeting, and my doctor didn't actually look at the test results before I got in there, because he thought the same thing. How could a guy with sub 10% body fat have some sort of issue? And so we were flipping through everything, and he lands on it's called a cardiac CT scan for calcium. And so it's just a picture of your heart looking for calcium. And I had, they have this great graph with the test, which shows you risk stratification, meaning what's your risk of a cardiac event. And he stopped and shouted, you have cardiovascular disease. So the entire office knew what happened, because we were both shocked. And in those moments where the floor drops out, and I hope this has never happened to people, but the floor drops out, no vision, everything in that moment, nothing else in my life mattered. It was oh crap, I got the exact same thing that killed my grandfather. My grandfather died before I knew him. I have zero memories of my grandfather, even though I was born when he was still alive. He was 400 pounds. He was morbidly obese. He had all of the signs and symptoms of cardiovascular disease, died of a heart attack. And now I had cardiovascular disease too. So
that's wild.
This was pretty crazy. And then 3 days later, I end up on an operating table getting an angiogram, because I didn't know the right questions to ask. And I just kind of went with what everybody was telling me to do, trying to figure out how I got cardiovascular disease. There were a couple of things that were wrong with my lifestyle at that point. I was traveling 4 out of 7 days of the week, was switching time zones at least once a week, usually going to Europe 12 times a year from Singapore. That's a 7-hour time change. I'm going to the United States 5 to 6 times a year. That's 12-hour time change.
Right.
Well, I didn't really have a circadian rhythm. I was also on top of that, stressed out of my mind, because finance does that to people.
Yes.
You add on top of that the CrossFit. And so if you picture the bucket of stress, it was absolutely obliterated. And so most people, you can manage a certain amount of stress. And I just told myself, hey, this is the lifestyle that you wanted. The stress comes with it. So therefore, just eat it up and, pretend like it doesn't bother you.
And grind.
And so that moment was just so ridiculous. I just remember the floor dropping out, blinders going on. And after that angiogram and having the doctor tell me, well, we don't know how you got this, but here's a statin. And I have nothing against modern medicine, right? I think we've done a lot of great things, but I didn't have high cholesterol. So I just started taking it, got all the side effects. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I am going to figure this out. And it's something that later on evolved into me starting a podcast so that I can ask all these people questions, because I didn't want to pay for consults. then it eventually evolved into what has now become basically my life's work with health optimization medicine and practice, the framework that we teach doctors and healthcare practitioners how to optimize for health rather than treat disease, and
Yes.
prescriptions as well.
Yes. And one of the ways that you describe it, or part of the language, is performance-based medicine. And when I first started learning about you and your story and your organization, for some reason that phrase really spoke to me. Could you share even a little more, like, what does performance-based medicine actually mean?
Sure. So the nonprofit's called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. And so what we're trying to do is to introduce into a healthcare system globally, and we have practitioners in at least 12 different countries right now, a role for a health manager. And if you think about healthcare right now, and this doesn't matter what country you're in, it's really disease management. And we in the United States pay a lot for disease management. Healthcare insurance on average costs $15,000 a year for a person right now. That's the highest in the world. The second highest is Switzerland. If you look at the results of paying that much money, and I'm a person who spent most of my life calculating return on investment, we're not getting the investing results that we would expect, right? If 66% of the world has a BMI that is classified as overweight, and I think 40% of the country right now is obese, so that's not working. And
Right.
so what we're proposing in health optimization medicine is to introduce that role of the health manager. The health manager is that person that I was looking for when I was in Singapore. And so when I was in Singapore, I wanted a doctor that I could work with to fix things like brain fog, to fix things like my energy levels. Why am I not sleeping well? Why don't I have any sort of stress resilience? Like I just took it on, right? And I didn't have that person. But with health optimization medicine practice, what we're teaching is essentially it's nutrient and hormone balancing, a little bit of biochemistry, dealing with things like the cell danger response, but also with an outcome of, can I get you to perform better? And performance means different things for different people. For certain people, it might be, can I pick up my grandkids?
Right.
For others, it might mean, can I wake up feeling refreshed during the day? For others, it might mean like, hey, how do I work through this startup without getting burnout? And so for me, that's what health optimization medicine really translates to. It's shifting that perspective from disease to health. And that's really the global movement that we're starting here. What does that result in? Performance. And so that really is the crux of health optimization medicine.
I think it's fantastic. Are you running into significant resistance, or are you finding that more people are more open to this? How is it received?
Sure. I'll tell you, because until 2 years ago, I lived in the Netherlands, which I lived in the Netherlands for 7 years. Prior to that, I lived in Singapore for 6 years. And so the majority of my adult life has actually been spent overseas. By and large, the Dutch are skeptics of an American getting on stage and talking about all of these things that seem pretty far out in terms of, let me optimize the health of your cells, balance your nutrients and hormones, because it's not something that has taken its way in Dutch society yet. And that was when I was initially talking about that when we first launched the nonprofit, really in 2020. You got a lot of skepticism. And I got it in Asia too. We have practitioners in the Philippines, Singapore, everywhere there's a healthy dose of skepticism. And I do say healthy because I do believe that people have an empowered responsibility to ask the questions and to learn in order to know what's right for them. So there is resistance. Now, within the United States, I would say there's we'll call it a beachhead, which is using a term from Crossing the Chasm. There's a beachhead of people who, in terms of innovation in health, the United States and potentially China are still at the forefront of this, health and longevity. So within the United States, there's a certain subsection of people that are concerned about, can I live longer? And right now, one of the things that is often talked about is something called morbidity compression, meaning, can I live better for longer? And then, when it's your time to go, it's just like, I've lived this great life and then bam, I'm done.
Right.
That I would say there's a portion of the United States that's open to that conversation, but similar to stockbrokers back in like the 50s to the 60s, that wasn't really an accepted medium until Merrill Lynch did it, putting brokers on Main Street in every suburb in the United States. If I use my cousins as a test, my cousins are in suburbia and have a healthy dose of skepticism for what I do. And so we do face resistance even among our own families
Right.
when it comes to this. But I would say people are opening up more because of what I alluded to earlier about healthcare costs. If I'm an American spending $15,000 a year and getting nothing for it, and I feel worse, I'm going to search for other answers. And so you have this growing, emerging population of both practitioners who are tired of the current healthcare system, and then patients who are tired of the results that they're getting, who are searching for more.
I think it's remarkable. When I think about my inner circle and many of my colleagues, I would say that we would be in the less skeptical group. It's a common, what you're describing is common among the people that I spend the most time with. And it's one of the reasons I find what you're doing so intriguing. And it's something that can, as you're committed to doing, it can actually create significant change for anyone who wants to be a part of it. And frankly, as it grows, I believe it would start to create change for people that are not even interested. Like people will start to benefit the larger this becomes.
Yeah, it's absolutely, because let's walk through that just for a second here.
Yes.
Right now, one of the, I guess, biggest resistances to this is cost. Because if you go to see a health optimization practitioner anywhere in the world, they're going to ask you to get certain tests. A metabolomics test, which is a measure of cell health and will tell you exactly what supplements you need, will cost you $450. And so for most people, that's a little out of reach. But when you start increasing the denominator of patients, Moore's law will take over. So the cost of testing will go down, which will make it accessible for more people.
For more.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's the mathematical function of it, but also, if your neighbor's doing it, you're going to want to do it too. It's like a keeping up with the Joneses thing.
Yes. Yes. We need that to spread like a virus, and have people want to do it more. When I think about you and what you've been through. So I just want to make sure we have clarity. You get diagnosed with cardiovascular disease. The floor disappears under you and you're free falling in what on earth is happening right now. The history with your grandfather, all of that. You said you went on statins and then you thought, I am going to solve this. And you started your podcast, did all of that. How have you changed your treatment? How are you doing today? Are you living, I believe you're living what you are teaching and promoting.
Yeah, so many people listening to this might know Simone Biles, right? And Simone Biles does these huge somersaults, and they're like, she does almost 900 degrees of spin. What's more relevant here is like 180 degree spin. And so to say my life is 180 degrees different, meaning an about face from where I was at that time, is 100% correct. So let's go back first to 2016 when this happened. I'm actually sitting on my 10-year anniversary of the diagnosis.
Oh, that's great.
Which I'll get to that here in a second because it's very germane. So do 180 degree spin. So 2016, what's my life like? I was traveling all over the world. Well, don't get me wrong. That's fantastic. I've had amazing life experiences, 40 countries in 4 years. I dined in dozens, if not 100 plus Michelin star restaurants, stayed in 5-star hotels, etc. Also with that came the 3 Negronis before dinner, the staying up way too late in order to finish a pitch deck, whatever. And I exercised way too much. And there is such a thing as exercising too much. It's hard to believe for people. So the 180 actually came with first an acknowledgement. Okay, what were the issues? What are the issues? While my sleep is not perfect, I was one of those people who used to think there's a rapper in the 90s called Nas, and he wrote a song called New York State of Mind. And that song is sleep is the cousin of death. And I used to think that. And so I would sleep 4 to 6 hours a night from the age of 18 to 30. I now can get 7.5 pretty regularly. And I really anchor my day around sleep because I know sleep is the Archimedes lever to my performance. But what affects sleep the most? It's stress. And so it took me a long time and this is very common, particularly among men, to admit that stress is an issue and to actually do things about it, because men oftentimes don't want to show the fact that they're stressed because it's not manly to be stressed, right?
Right.
And so there are a few things that I would say in terms of lifestyle changes that really move the needle. The two of which I just mentioned, which is working on stress resilience, because stress is ubiquitous. It's always going to be there. And to think that you're going to live in a utopia is probably very far off. And so
Correct.
working on stress resilience. And so what are some of the ways you work on stress resilience? Well, anything from simple stuff like breath work, you know, you can use things like box breathing to help with focus, but also 4-7-8 will help with breath, will help with relaxation. That can be game changer when it comes to going to sleep. So 4-7-8 is essentially inhale for 4, hold for 7, release for 8. That the ratio is what matters there rather than the actual count itself. And then on top of that, things like gratitude.
Yes.
It's surprising, and there's studies around this, like writing down 5 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, has been profound in changing my mindset, right? Writing down 3 things you're grateful for at the beginning of the day. So an object in front of you, something you're going to do today, a relationship you have, just so you don't get on to like automatically writing down 3 things and they're the same 3 things every day.
That's right.
Those things can be profound when it comes to stress. Also things like training heart rate variability or the health of your nervous system. Absolutely profound. But then you get into sleep. And so anchoring my day around sleep. So unlike most people, my schedule starts with when I go to sleep. And so the founding pioneer of health optimization medicine and mentor of mine, Dr. Ted, we always work together on everything that we do. He developed this thing called the sleep anchoring technique, which is basically like your day starts when you go to sleep. So for me, you're not going to find me past 9:30 p.m. because I'm an early riser and I want to be in bed, or at least in the process of going to bed, by 9:30. And so anchoring my day around sleep. I also gave up alcohol. We can talk about different ways to do that because I think there's a great way to gamify it. And using substitutes can help out really well. And then when it came to exercise and travel, initially I didn't reduce my travel. I was actually probably traveling more when I first started being an entrepreneur, but I also learned to manage travel better, making sure that I optimize my hormones when I travel, using things like, and this is where prescriptions are helpful, your cortisone to manage my cortisol levels while I'm traveling so that jet lag doesn't have as much of a physiological impact on me. It still makes me tired,
Right.
but it doesn't necessarily destroy my whole nervous system.
Mhm.
And then, so eventually dialing back the travel to the necessities and also making sure that my workouts. So for me, I look at workouts more as the recovery equals the stimulus, meaning that if I'm not able to anchor my sleep as well, my workout the next day is likely going to be something that's much more parasympathetic, like yoga, rather than going and weightlifting. I still lift weights a few times a week. I do a lot of long distance cardio and popularly called zone 2 training now, right?
Okay.
So all of that is kind of an example of how this has been 180. But what have the results been? And so this is kind of funny. 10 years later, so the most advanced cardiac imaging you can get right now is called Clearly. And what it does is it measures both soft plaque presence and hard plaque or formed plaque. And so the cardiac CT scan for calcium that I got when I was 30 only measures hard plaque. Thing is that the soft plaque is the most dangerous because that's what can actually cause cardiac events. Hard plaque is dangerous too, but it's more likely that soft plaque causes cardiac events. And so 18 months so I just got the results back last night, actually. 18 months, I've taken my low density non-calcified plaque from basically down 96%. It's almost non-existent now. And all of that has been a result of lifestyle change. And so over the course of the past 10 years, I've managed to completely invert my lifestyle, going back to that Simone Biles reference.
Right.
The results are pretty incredible, right? And a lot of it's just lifestyle change. Now, of course, I'm balancing my nutrients. I'm testing every 6 months, and we can get into that and why that's important. But it's actually kind of funny to reflect at my 40th birthday that I might be healthier now than I was when I was 30.
Right. And you were living when you were 30 thinking that you were doing everything to support optimum health.
Yeah. It's interesting.
You were committed and in it. It sounds like you were engaged with life,
I was a competitive CrossFit athlete. And so when you think about it, we do such a bad job of society with definitions. So what is health? To me, when my 30-year-old self said health is the capacity to work more, look good naked, and sleep less. Now, One of those three doesn't make any sense. But basically, if I had a six pack, I was considered healthy. And now we have a more formal definition of it. A plus B equals C. So A is the absence of disease. And so everybody, if you polled the 8 billion people in the world, that's probably the most common part that you would hear. B is balance of anabolic and catabolic processes in the body. What we want is balance. I think a lot of people think of putting on muscle and anabolic process as like the best thing ever. And don't get me wrong, muscle's important, but anabolic gone wrong is cancer. Catabolic, which a lot of people seem to think that this is negative. Well, catabolic is not just breaking down muscle, it's also clearing out waste products in your cells. And so if you're not doing those efficiently and in balance, your body's out of homeostasis and things can go wrong. And then finally, the last part is life cycle of the organism. So the C is life cycle of the organism. And so what we want to do is we look at your age right now, we benchmark you versus others your age, but then we want you to kind of age backwards. And what that means is going back to optimal levels, which are between 21 and 40 or 21 and 30 years of age, not 40, which are evolutionary optimized levels for your nutrient and hormones.
And that's something that you're saying is possible for anyone listening. If they want to meet with one of these doctors and go through this process, they can start to create that type of change within themselves.
Absolutely. Everything I've told you so far has been 100% within the framework of health optimization medicine. So anybody can reach out to me after listening to this show, and I'll connect you to a practitioner, and they'll go through a process of identifying, where your nutrients and hormones are now and really balancing that cell and making sure that the cell is the foundational building block of you, right? And if you get the cell biology right and balanced, everything else just kind of works. So what we really focus on are the cell, because that's also the lowest common denominator that we can test right now. And that's really, really important. And that's accessible to anybody. You might have to do a lot of work to get there.
Right.
It's not like, for example, my father always looks for like the one pill that will fix everything. That I can assure you the silver bullet does not exist, but we can work together over time to address some of those issues that are coming up for you. And we'll work on the cell along the way, and some of those issues might just fall away.
Well, I want to go back to something you mentioned. You talked about how changing time zones frequently, you believe, from the way you described it, it was part of what wreaked havoc with your system. Could you talk about that a little bit more? What is that impact of dramatic time zone changes on a regular basis?
So let me go into, this is going to eventually talk about biological rhythms and a particular fascination of mine with chronobiology. And so chronobiology is the science and study of biological rhythms. And let's even pan out further for a perspective shift for everybody listening to this. So if you think about your body, it's actually not, it's more fair to say that you're a collection of organisms rather than a superorganism, meaning that a superorganism would be a collection of the same thing. So yes, you have cells, and perhaps, and I might get the number wrong here, but 1 trillion plus cells. You have gut bacteria. You have viruses existing within you. You have fungus existing within you. Candida actually exists in everybody, but it's the overgrowth that causes havoc. And so what we like to teach people at health optimization medicine is to have a holobiont perspective, because when you look at the body of a collection of organisms, there's actually a name for it. It's called the holobiont. And really what you're looking to do there is to balance those organisms. So let's get into that travel component. Our body is a collection of all of these organisms, several trillion, right? It has to find a way to run efficiently and not erratic, because if it's erratic, then like, oh man, my right arm's going up and I don't know why. Right. You can picture that, right? Like that's just an example, right? Or I have a sharp pain in my stomach and I don't know why. But your body aligns this all beautifully through evolution, through chronobiology. And so the biological rhythm that most people know is the circadian rhythm. And so you have a sleep and awake cycle. We know that people who have shift work, so work overnight, it's a carcinogen. And so that can cause cancer. And so aligning your body's circadian rhythms is very important. 2 ways to do that, and those are called Zeitgebers. One is light. This is why you always see the blinds open in my office. Number two is food, right? And so if you think about travel, particularly travel when you're going across time zones, what are you doing? You're now shifting your sleep wake cycle, right? Because when you get, let's say I were to fly to Amsterdam tomorrow, it's 7 hours ahead of here. I want to be able to go and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my friends at the same time. But my body's back on Chicago time.
Right.
And so your body actually takes about a day per hour of shift, right? And so that means that's why you wake up in the middle of the night. You call it jet lag. Or you might, let's say you were going to the bathroom at the beginning of the day, you might start going to the bathroom at the end of the day, etc. There's all different cues to tell you that your body's biological rhythms are out of line. Now, if you take this and do this consistently for years, in my case, of traveling across time zones at least once a week, prolonged disturbance of biological rhythms can wreak havoc. Testosterone has a twice a month rhythm. The female body has a once a month ovarian cycle, etc. And so if you're doing this all the time and those rhythms get completely destroyed, basically, what can happen? We know this. Downstream effects, things that can happen: cancer, cardiovascular disease, all kinds of inflammation. All of that is a hallmark of disrupted biological rhythms. So when I work with somebody, and I don't work with that many people anymore, one of the first things I go to is routines and how much do you travel? Because that's usually where a lot of disruption lies. And it all is because of this simple science of biological rhythms. People don't like to hear it, but health can be relatively simple. And a lot of that starts with just making sure your routines are in place.
So it's interesting because I feel almost like and I'm not an expert in this, but I love traveling and I love traveling across time zones.
Oh, me too. I
I've
still
been
love to
to,
travel. Don't get me
right.
wrong.
So when I do it, not that it's about me, let's say that I go from Los Angeles to France. When I do it, whenever possible, I will stay there at least a month. I've gone on 3-month and 4-month long trips abroad. When I went to Japan, I was there for nearly 4 weeks. So in my mind, and I'm wondering if I'm deluding myself, and I know you're not a doctor, but in my mind, I think I know I'm putting a toll on my body by changing these dramatic time zones. But then once I get there, I stay long enough that I allow my body to recuperate. And then when I come home, I'm conscientious about recuperation. Am I deluding myself? Should I seek more in terms of that?
So first off, full disclosure, I love traveling. My wife and I love traveling. Perhaps my favorite thing is to explore other cultures.
Yes.
And if you actually look at my background, whether it's finance, culture, or health, the through line there is human behavior. And one of the great ways to observe human behavior is to go to another country.
Yes.
And I've been blessed to go to 65 countries in this world. I'm not going to stop traveling because that is good. Like by and large, my favorite thing to do.
Right.
But let's take your question here a little bit differently and say, like, how can we optimize our travel schedules a little bit? And so first things first, the fact that you're going for a couple of weeks is usually a good sign, right? Despite what people say about jet lag, your body takes about 1 day per hour of time zone shift to adjust. And so in all fairness, the moment you get on a plane, you're inducing stressors to your body.
Right.
That doesn't mean that everybody should stop traveling. Like, I'm never going to stop traveling. But there are better ways to do this. And so what does like good travel or what we'll call health optimized travel look like? So you have a prep period before, let's say you're going more than a couple of time zones away. You have a prep period. There's an app that I love called Time Shifter.
Okay.
Stephen Lockley from Harvard put it together.
Okay.
And you mentioned earlier that I'm not a doctor, but I do work with some of the highest performing entrepreneurs in the world as sort of their health consultant.
That's
so
right.
I deal with this all the time, right?
Yes.
And so you download Time Shifter, you plug in your flight details and where you're going. And I go to New Zealand roughly twice a year because my wife's from there. And that's an 18-hour time change, by the way. And so that'll give you a prep in terms of how late you should stay up, when do you need to use melatonin and when do you need light. And it really only works with light, caffeine, and melatonin.
Okay.
You do your prep period there. And so the day of the travel, selfishly, I take our own products at Triscriptions. And so I'm going to take methylene blue, which is a very powerful antioxidant, about 2 hours before I get on the plane. And then depending on how long the flight is, I might redose about 4 hours in.
Okay.
I'm going to take methylene blue because it's going to help protect me from basically you're in a tube with 300 plus other people who likely have a worse immune system than you, right? And so what I'm looking for is that protection. We also have another product called Tromune, which has a really cool ingredient called cordycepin, which helps your immune system function. And it's an immune system modulator. And so I would also take that, especially if it's an overnight flight, because it can help with sleep.
Okay.
Now, you get there, you land, and you still have your time shifter app, but what you want to do is you want to adjust right away, because unless you're a Formula One driver who is planning to, and I've worked with those types of people, who's planning to, drive at night, you want to be able to adjust to the breakfast, lunch, dinner schedule of whatever country or city you're in. So that requires a couple of things. So light, first thing in the morning. Try and force yourself to wake up. If you're one of those people who are blessed to sleep extra long when you're jet lag, then wake up early, get some light in your face. Light, again, is that syncer of circadian rhythms. It goes into something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is your master regulator of biological rhythms. That'll help hormones like cortisol, which cortisol gets demonized, but it is what causes you to wake up in the morning. And also testosterone, estrogen, etc. It'll help sync all of those rhythms. And you do that every single day. Now, the other thing you can do is to start to time your meals. So one of the things that I like to do when I travel overseas is to have one meal sync with my home time zone. That makes coming back a lot easier.
Okay.
But even if I go to New Zealand, I'll make sure that one of my meals will sync with one of my meals in my home time zone. This gets into something called time restricted feeding, whereby you only have certain eating windows during the day. But you want to sync those with whatever time zone you're in, because your body will get its second cue from food. Now, the third thing, this requires a prescription, and this is a little cheat that I haven't actually given out on a podcast.
Okay.
You can get a prescription for hydrocortisone. So hydrocortisone is it's called bioidentical hormone. And so what it can do is so cortisol in the body goes up when you wake up. That's why you wake up. That's how you wake up feeling refreshed. And it basically gradually goes down throughout the day. I'm simplifying it, but you can actually take hydrocortisone to mimic what the ideal cortisol rhythm is over the course of the day. And that, along with melatonin at night, because your melatonin rhythm's also out of whack, will help sync your body much faster. Your point about duration of trips, we live in the United States where most people get less than 14 days of vacation a year. If you can't take a 2-week trip, then what I just told you before is the absolute best way that you can do this. If you can take a 14 plus day trip, good on you. Pat yourself on the back. You're winning. But I would still follow that protocol because it'll protect you. You can also up basic antioxidants like vitamin C and glutathione and N-acetylcysteine and a few others because those will help protect you from inflammation. Overall, travel is amazing. And I will not stop doing it because I love going to other countries. If I don't have many quote unquote life goals. One of them is to visit every country. I have a lot to go, but it's one of those things that, one of these days I might take 2 years off and just go to every country.
Right.
And I don't want to stop doing that. And so how do I do that? But also how do I practice this thing that I preach called morbidity compression? And that's the best way that I've found.
Well, you know what I'm hearing, Boomer, is that you can still live this full life, and there's knowledge, especially with your nonprofit, the physicians you're working with, and with transcriptions, which we can get in a minute, where you can live this life, live a full life, achieve what you want in your dreams, and also work towards the morbidity compression.
Absolutely.
Right.
What I would just say is, chemistry is not a bad thing. Chemistry and these advances we've made in pharmacology and chemistry are great. Take advantage of them. Like, we have these supplements available to us. You have to be careful on quality, of course.
Yes.
But you have all of these things available to you. And just with a wee bit of knowledge, probably a coach is better. I'm not saying do shift work, although there are ways to hack that, air quotes, but you can pretty much get away with, travel and all of these things that your body through evolutionary means just isn't used to. And so we need to take advantage of that modern technology because frankly, our bodies are basically like a Model T and we're living in a our bodies are a Model T and we're living in a Lamborghini world, right?
Right.
And so the technology has come so far, we got to use that technology to help propel us to live in sort of a more evolutionary optimized way.
Well, I want to go back to one of the beginnings of your story. You were leaving a career in finance where you had achieved success in the travel and everything you were doing.
I had the
And
golden handcuffs.
so you had made that strong decision and you were going to become an entrepreneur. When you were going to become an entrepreneur, is the path you're on today the path that you had in mind when you left finance?
Hell no.
I didn't think so. So could you tell, because this is the interstate that's easy to do. And
So 2016, I actually had a very elaborate business plan, which I find business plans amusing now. And I do a little bit of venture investing. Whenever I see a very elaborate business plan, it's actually a red flag.
right.
But I had this incredibly elaborate business plan about how to build an app because it was 2016 and everybody was building
Right.
apps back then, right? I built an app for business travelers and health because at that point I thought I had mastered health for business travelers. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that everybody else has the gift that I figured out over the past 7 years. Two things happened with that. Number one, my go-to-market strategy was around partnering with CrossFit, which at that time the organization was very litigious. And because I knew everybody in the CrossFit world, that organization was very litigious. And I remember is basically when I was getting close to launching the product, getting a cease and desist letter. And so, like, you can imagine somebody who broke the golden handcuffs
Right.
sitting there in my apartment in Amsterdam. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
what do I do now? Because my whole strategy was built around this one organization. Around that time, my heart condition, like I couldn't feel it before. And then I was starting to feel it. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go and figure this out more, right? So this is where the figuring out comes in. And around this time, also, you have the emergence of various omics sciences. So metabolomics has been around since 1980s. We've talked about that a little already, but genetics was getting very popular. And despite being a finance guy, air quotes, I do know my way around statistics and data. And so I was very comfortable going into these incredibly large data sets and saying, what's relevant? That actually, as I was doing that, funny enough, I had a couple of friends in finance, like we would keep in touch because that's what you do. And they were asking me what I was doing. I explained it to them. They're like, can you just do that for me? Because no doctor's doing that for me. And that led me to build a coaching business. I had no intention of ever doing coaching or consulting or whatever you want to call it. I still, in a way, I'm good at it, but like I only do it for a certain patient population. At that time also, I wanted access to more information. And so I started a podcast. It's still out there. I pay the monthly fee to keep it listed, but I don't do any episodes anymore, called Decoding Superhuman. And I went and this is before podcasts got really popular, by the way.
Right.
And so I would just use it as a vehicle to interview whoever I wanted to about, areas that I found interesting and
So brilliant.
could also help my heart condition, right?
Yes.
So I built out this sort of lattice of knowledge that kind of all stemmed from this point of disease. And then I realized about midway through when I was doing the podcast, I'd met Dr. Ted and Dr. Scott, and we're the co-founders of Triscriptions. Dr. Ted's the founding pioneer of health optimization medicine practice. And they started describing me some of the ideas. And I'm like, you know what? I'm probably thinking about the problem the wrong way. What if I actually look at it from this lens? I was looking at the problem the wrong way. And, when I was having these conversations with Ted and Scott, they kind of enlightened me around concepts we talked about earlier, the holobiont, and we talked a lot about morbidity compression, although we didn't really call it that then. And I said, okay, if I look at it from this perspective, how do I just make myself healthy? What's going to happen to this disease state? And the truth of it all is over the past 10 years, I've been much more focused about rarely have a conversation with any sort of physician about cardiovascular disease. It's more about this vector of how do I just make myself healthy at a foundational level? And once I got that, so shockingly enough, the other issue fell away. And so what I want to demonstrate there is that a lot of my initial intention about lifestyle design, lifestyle creation, I still did it, but it was through a pivot that I had to make because my initial product, which at some point I might still do because I just want to,
Right.
my initial product kind of fell apart in my hands.
Right.
And so I had a few kind of bumps along the road, but did I get to a point where now we have a really good company, an amazing movement, an incredible community? Absolutely. It doesn't look exactly as I kind of scripted out in 200 pages of a business plan, which now I kind of laugh about.
Right.
And I have a copy of it, and it's just like, it's something that I sometimes like pull up on my screen to realize like, hey, you know what happens when you overanalyze something?
This.
It's just a good reminder.
Right.
And I think along the way, I actually learned a lot more about being flexible because, Bezos said this, and you don't have to like Bezos to appreciate some of the things he says.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm very much focused on the mission, less focused on how I get there. And so for me, if the mission is, shifting perspective from disease to health, we call it also democratized enlightenment, which is a word that is oftentimes obtuse for people. I can get into that in a bit. But shifting perspective from disease to health, we put the mission out there and be very, very flexible about how we get there. And because, markets change, the economy changes. We know this right now, right? Everything changes day to day. And so, for me, it's kind of amusing to look back on because it was very much banker boomer sitting there and saying, I can put this into my spreadsheet and then manifest it into the world. It did happen in some ways, but it took a very different path of getting there than I originally expected.
And it's really incredible. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm assuming, and I think it's safe to assume that when you got that cease and desist letter, you were probably disappointed, confused, shocked. What on earth? And yet what initially seemed like a massive obstacle and disappointment guided you in a slightly different path of building what you've built. I'm going to go on a limb and say that I think what you've built is stronger and more viable and impacting more because of the process you went through to get there.
Absolutely. If you think about business travelers that actually care about fitness, it's a very, very small market, much smaller than you think. But when you look at what we're trying to do now, which is actually introducing something into the global healthcare system. A lot of us are focused on the United States just because it's so big. And if you can make, quoting Jay-Z, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Right.
But if we can make that improvement in even any country, the amount of people that we'll affect will dwarf what I was looking at for before.
Right.
The amount of people we affect now, if you think about one practitioner sees anywhere from 50 to 200 people. And, we have thousands of practitioners that use Triscriptions products. And that, to me, is the most rewarding aspect of my job, is to know that our products are making a huge difference in everybody's lives. Our education is helping those practitioners make a huge difference in everybody's lives.
So I want to ask real quick about Triscriptions. And just correct me where I'm wrong, because I may not get this exactly right. But your passion and mission with Triscriptions is that you're holding whatever product you make to the same standards as a full-on prescription medication. Am I capturing that right?
I'll go into Triscriptions just a little bit. I'll pan back and I'll come to your question here. So we started Triscriptions in health optimization medicine and practice at the same time, roughly within a couple of days of each other. And initially, with health optimization medicine and practice, this was something that Dr. Ted developed in working with politicians and business tycoons, that type of thing, over decades. What we found was we can teach you 7 different verticals of health, anything from chronobiology to exposomics, or study of environment and the toxins, epigenetics, metabolomics, bioenergetics, evolutionary medicine, chronobiology, right? We can teach you that. But if a patient comes into your door and we tell the patient that it's going to take 6 to 9 months in the best of cases for you to feel better, they're going to fire you, and they should, right? They're going to go find somebody else who's going to tell them it's a shorter period, even if it's not. And so you needed to find a stopgap in order to give somebody a solution to issues that they they have now. And so we create a product company in order to do so. It's actually called the reciprocity model. And so it's an old business model that, we're jumping on because we think having a nonprofit and a for-profit allows us to give back to the world right away rather than waiting until we get rich later or,
Right.
whatever it is,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And so, to the standards point, this company was started by 4 medical doctors and myself. 2 of them are still involved in the day-to-day of the company, and we needed to create products that all of us could use in our clinics. So we needed pharmaceutical grade ingredients. We needed to know that purity and potency were 100% there. We needed to know that there are no presence of heavy metals because that will ruin your cells more than anything, and no presence of toxins like microbials or just different bacteria.
Right.
So what we do at Transcriptions is as close as a pharmaceutical drug as possible, but we don't do clinical trials because people need help right now. And so when you buy one of our products, you know that the ingredients are tested when we buy them from wherever we buy them. We have partnerships with universities in South Africa and other places. We test them as soon as they get on shore. If they don't meet our testing requirements, which are stricter than the US dietary supplement requirements, then we send it back. Then once the product is made, you need to know that what you're taking is exactly what's on the label. And so we test it further again, and we do that on each batch.
Wow.
So that what you're taking is really what's
What you're
on
taking.
the label.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one of my side quests in this, I guess that's a cool term that people like to use now, is to make sure that we elevate the supplement industry in general. If you look at the Dietary Supplement Act or acts in the United States, your product is required to have plus minus 20% of what's on the label. We narrowed that significantly. And I would tell you that most supplement companies don't even verify it. And so my side mission here is to establish something in between a pharmaceutical drug and a dietary supplement, a quality product that you can know is done to a standard that allows you to buy a product and know that it's got what it says in it. It's also up to you as the patient and hopefully working with a practitioner to know what products are best for you. But that's a sort of separate discussion around testing.
Having that passion and the possibility of creating that impact you're like filling the gap. You're going right in between the gap, and it should cause others to rise up.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats. And, if I was doing this just to make money, I think I would work in another industry. But what we're doing is really going back to that mission we discussed earlier, that shifting perspective from disease to health. The worst thing for me is if somebody goes out with good intentions to buy a dietary supplement and fix themselves because they've already taken that step to say, I want to be healthy. And the product is either A, formulated wrong, and some of the most popular products out there are formulated wrong, or it doesn't have what's on the label, or worse, it has heavy metals. That's the worst thing for me, because a person steps out of their way, spends their hard-earned money on a product that probably won't make them healthy or make them worse. And then they're going to say, why did I even do this?
That's right.
And so they're going to turn their backs on it. And that is kind of defeating the greater mission. And so for us, it's really about, when we give clinicians in particular, and the through line to all of our product development, by the way, is we're going to we think of ourselves as a solution company rather than a supplement company, because supplement companies will provide things like vitamin C, vitamin D, etc. There's nothing wrong with those at all. They're great. And they're great when you need them. But what we want to do is solve common issues that come through a practitioner's door. So what are those? Stress, sleep, anxiety, immune system function, focus, energy. We'll come out with products for pain, sexual health, mood, or depression very soon. And those things really, really matter. And we want to be the go-to solution. We strive to be the go-to solution for those common issues that come through the practitioner door.
I think that's fantastic. And with Transcriptions in particular, is that only available for people that are working with one of your practitioners, or is that something that anyone could go to? I know ideally, as you said, it would be with a practitioner, but if someone is listening to this and they have some knowledge or they've worked with someone already, could they go to Transcriptions and
Absolutely.
use?
So
Okay.
we have a consumer facing line, and then we have a practitioner line. The practitioner line is called Tro Plus.
Okay.
Those do need to be administered by a practitioner. The
Okay.
reason for that is they tend to be stronger. So we have a sleep product called Tro Plus Somna, which when we were in R&D, we call the product Knockout because
There you
it's
go.
meant for people with insomnia. And so that needs to be administered by a practitioner. But we have other products, Blue Canatine, Just Blue, Trocalm, Tromune. Those are all consumer facing products that you can take today. You can go out and buy it today, and they'll help you with things like stress, sleep, anxiety, stress, sleep, immune system function, focus, etc.
So I have a couple of questions. So let's say someone currently has an autoimmune disease because that's a chronic situation, at least in the US. Is there an opportunity for them to improve their situation by working with someone from either one of the practitioners that is involved in your approach to health? I just am curious about is
Yeah, sure. So it all like really depends on the autoimmune condition, right? So generally speaking, autoimmune conditions can be like diagnosis by elimination, meaning that it's not really a direct diagnosis, or they can be diagnosed. So let's talk about a couple of different situations. So in the case of somebody who has like Hashimoto's or Graves', which is really just either an overactive or an underactive thyroid, and that's a very, very common diagnosis, you can work with a health optimization medicine doctor who's also familiar with hormones to help balance your nutrients and hormones. And once you get your thyroid balanced, let's see what happens. We never make any claims on disease, but it's one of those things that, we've had some good results there. When it comes to other areas like Crohn's, which is an area I have a tremendous amount of experience in, that usually you're working alongside with, in my case, I always work alongside with a physician. So when it comes to health optimization medicine, you have what's health optimization medicine versus health optimization practice. And so we've divided the curriculum into two because health optimization medicine is for medical doctors and osteopaths, etc. And then health optimization practice is for anything from a health coach to somebody like a naturopath, for example. And they're going to have different approaches to doing things. Also within health optimization practice, they don't typically get into hormones. So when I have a client who has an autoimmune condition, usually what I tell them or what I ask first is like, what types of testing have you actually done? What's funny is that it's not really funny, but like oftentimes they haven't done a ton of testing. And so you want to set them up on a basic metabolomics test, which will tell you what nutrients you're either inefficient, insufficient, or deficient in. Look at your gut and your gut health. You can do that through a 3-day stool test. I always like 3-day stool tests versus 1 day because I have not yet met somebody who's going to clear their entire small intestine in one visit to the toilet. And then a food sensitivities test. Now, when it comes to autoimmune conditions, food sensitivity tests can be incredibly helpful. And so just having that level of detail, we're talking 400 plus biomarkers come back, will be able to help look at your cell and say, what does your cell need now? We also look at different stages of the cell danger response to understand if you're in CDR1, there's 3 stages of the cell danger response. CDR1 is basically when your cells are throwing up the flag and saying warning, warning, warning. CDR2 is when there's a lot of inflammation. And CDR3 is sort of when the body starts to resolve itself. I'm simplifying there, so if there is somebody who's a biochemist listening to this, don't skewer me. But what we can do is help you identify what your cells need now and give you what your cells need now. This can also go hand in hand with your illness medicine doctor who's maybe prescribing levothyroxine or whatever it is, right? In order to manage your thyroid. And the two in combination do work really well together. And can help with cellular level health in an autoimmune condition. It'll help identify areas where you can work on and some things that you might not know already.
Restart that. I'm just glad to hear that because there has been a surge in autoimmune disorders. And as you said so brilliantly about how some of them, it's not necessarily a positive tested diagnosis. It is we've eliminated so many other things. So we're left with this. And it's an area where I know even amongst my clients, which we're dealing with real estate and business entrepreneurship, right? I know enough that have different types. And so I was curious if this was a possible new approach that someone who is disappointed in what they're currently doing, they may be able to seek this out and it
I
could
think
lead to
it's
change.
I think it's a great path for anyone to go down. You know, in an ideal world, if I'm speaking to my 25-year-old self, or even let's go all the way back to 16 or 12 or whatever, I'd have this I'll call him a coach for lack of a better word, or my health manager with me along the journey, who's going to make sure that as I go through the seasons and vicissitudes of life, that I'm adjusting my nutrients to what I need, and perhaps even my hormones earlier on. And likely you might avoid some of these situations.
Right.
Now, that's the vision, the dream is, can I leave a world where this manager is with somebody? It's almost like getting a pediatrician in some ways. Can you get somebody with you to help you along that journey so that you can reduce healthcare costs later? Because it's not something, when we talk about healthcare costs and potentially even like the global economy, particularly in the United States, healthcare costs are potentially one of the things that could bankrupt the country. And
Yes.
it's just something that I find is resolvable, but with a much more long-term solution, which goes against all of our immediate gratification tendencies.
Well, you mentioned that you are coming up on the 10-year anniversary of your diagnosis. How are you feeling about it? Is it reason to celebrate?
Well, I find it funny that I got the test results back last night before I came on this podcast, right? And so, yes, is it reason to celebrate? I think so. To almost entirely remove the highest risk plaque is something I'm going to pat myself on the back for.
Yeah.
And I think, the journey has been one, everybody, when you plot out your career, you kind of think it goes this way, straight line up and to the right. It's been one that has been a little bit more of like playing chutes and ladders when you're a kid. And it's been incredibly rewarding. So right after this, I'll probably we have a chat with all of our practitioners, people around the world. And I'll probably go into the chat and we'll have a conversation about, whatever. And just to see that community really start to take off is more than I can ask for.
It's really remarkable. And it truly shows that I know this phrase gets overused, but you're living a life full of passion as fuel and desire for impact and a life by design. And it's very inspiring. So I want to just thank you. And not just passion, but success. I didn't even mention yet, and doing research, preparing to meet with you, Transcriptions it's in what's the 99th fastest growing healthcare company in the United States right now, according to Inc. Inc.
Yeah. And
5000,
so
right?
you did good research. Last year we were 99. This year we should actually be higher.
Excellent, even better, right?
And that to me is, one of the things, of course, I look at revenue because it would be irresponsible as a CEO to not look at revenue.
Right.
But one of the things that I found interesting was we can do rough estimates on how many hours we've helped people. And so last year we provided, and this is just one of our products, and we have now 10, we provided 3.5 million hours of higher energy, which is awesome when you think about it from a productivity standpoint.
Right.
On top of that, our now second best-selling product, and this is always a good thing for me to look at, not just in terms of sales, but also in terms of how we're helping people. And sometimes I even go into Reddit and like check what people think of us.
Right.
Our second best-selling product is our sleep product. And so the sleep product is my favorite product that we have. I take it every single day. It's called Trozi. And if we can give people the average American sleeps 4 to 6 hours a night. And if we can get people up to 7, just what impact that will have in terms of their mood the next day, and also how they treat other people, that has a bit of a domino effect. And so I'm super excited for what we've built now. And I would just say we're really only scratching the surface. We're just getting started.
Well, I want to thank you for being a guest. It's really impactful work, and you are making a difference. And it's in an area where I believe so many people, even people that are already in their 50s, they are looking at longevity and what can I do now? Even if you're looking to undo years of damage, you could still start now. And you're providing a path for people to do it in a positive manner.
Yeah, for anybody listening to this, the best time to start was probably 10, 20 years ago, but the second best time to start is now.
Today, yeah.
And it's really just a matter of, look, I'm always happy to answer questions. So just reach out to me and I can hopefully connect you to the right person and get you started.
And all of your links for connecting with you, wherever you're consuming this podcast, it is in the description. You do have a website people can go to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Triscriptions.com is the products that we've talked about on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then homehope.org, there's actually a way that you can just send a message to us and we'll get you in touch with a practitioner. We have practitioners in 12 different countries, but most of them practice telehealth and they're able to see you anywhere in the world. So please do reach out and we're happy to help.
So I'm glad you shared that about autoimmune disease. Another real situation that we're facing, especially in the United States, is the mental health crisis. There is the loneliness epidemic, which used to impact primarily men, but unfortunately women are closing the gap. There is depression, anxiety, broad range of mental health issues. Could this be a fresh approach for someone who has been struggling with mental health? Is there a place within what you offer that may impact their results?
Of course. So I always like to start this by saying anxiety's been Santa's little helper my entire life.
Okay.
And I have had anxiety probably before I was 12, but that was sort of the first instances when I remember it. And, there's a couple types of people who get anxiety. Sometimes it's a thing that pushes you forward. Sometimes it paralyzes you. I happen to be on the pushing forward side, but, I've gone through the vicissitudes of panic attacks, not being able to sleep, and still have flare-ups every once in a while. I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect. And I think most people that try to paint the image of being perfect are frankly lying.
Yes.
But, where does health optimization medicine play a role in mental health? I'm a huge advocate for therapy. And I have my own therapist. I also do partake in psychedelic assisted therapy, which I can get into. But let's get into, how health optimization medicine can help. And I'll give a specific example. So when you think about you as a construction of organisms, and some of those organisms being cells, and what our objective is as your health manager is to balance nutrients and hormones, simplifying what we're doing. In the act of balancing nutrients and hormones, you have to look at things like neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitter metabolites, it's not a perfect measurement, but we do look at them. And you can look at, dopamine, acetylcholine, so dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, which is the principal neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system, norepinephrine, which is the principal neurotransmitter of the sympathetic nervous system. And in the act of just measuring those, you know where you stand. But we like to take action on things because the purpose of measurement is to know where we need to direct the ship. And what we can do is start to look at if your serotonin is through the roof, well, maybe we need to balance that a little bit more. There are a couple of reasons why serotonin metabolites would be through the roof. Number one is stress. There's some illness medicine conditions that might also be the case. And again, just going back to basic principles, you do need to go see an illness medicine doctor as well as work with a health manager or health optimization practitioner because you want to make sure you're covering all your bases. But when you're going back to the original question, when you're going to address mental health, balancing your neurotransmitters is incredibly important. How do we get acetylcholine, which is again, that principal neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system, how do we get that back online? How do we help you access your parasympathetic nervous system? Because a lot of people that are going through mental health issues are ultimately, going through nervous system issues too. We have a society where it is very financially rewarding for you to be on all the time. And when you're on all the time, you're not resting, you're not digesting, and you're not in your parasympathetic state. And so we can look at also even in our products, one of our specializations is a neurotransmitter called GABA. GABA is your body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter. We make sure that we can get GABA in the brain to help you relax. And that's something that I think will pay dividends for people. Of course, working with a practitioner helps you hit that multiplier effect quicker. But, just looking at yourself, and if you could analyze yourself and saying like, am I getting 7.5 hours of sleep, am I relaxed, etc. This is where wearables also help, because they'll tell you if you're lying to yourself. You can use our products as well as a practitioner to help with mental health. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, Boomer, I want to thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I think this, as you shared, it's the beginning of change, and you are successfully creating ripples in an industry that needed it and I believe wanted it, whether they would admit that or not. And the innovation that you're bringing to the table and the passion you're bringing to the table is palpable. So I just want to thank you for sharing your journey and everything you're doing.
Bridget, thank you so much. It's been, look, I love the fact that you've opened your platform to me to have this conversation. Huge fan of the Interstate and everything you stand for. So, you always have a cheerleader in me. But thank you for this conversation. I hope your audience finds it useful.
I do too. And remember, you can reach out to Boomer and find out what's possible for yourself on your journey of optimizing your health. So it's really exciting. If you're listening to this episode, I hope you'll join us again.